We live in a postmodern world. There is no such thing as the truth. There are just many truths, and we all have things that we believe in. And if we believe in something, that is our right. Indeed, you could say that is who we are. And if we find that our beliefs are being challenged, then we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our truth. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Tuesday, August the 4th, 2026. In this video, I will be looking at the broad astrological picture, and I'll be considering some of the main aspects taking place today. For example, the moon is making a square to Mercury, it's making a sextile to Mars, and I think for some of us it might be a time to be defending our truth. I also want to have a brief look at what is going on from a Vedic perspective. You know, Vedic astrology is not something I do a great deal of. I mean, I do Vedic astrology to some extent, but it's not the main type of astrology I use. And additionally, there was some stuff going on with Bitcoin. There was a big drain of funds. People had their Bitcoin in a wallet, a particular wallet. I think it was called the Coldcard, and there was a particular version of the Coldcard wallet that was vulnerable. And I did talk earlier last month about the horoscope of Bitcoin. And I want to have another look at the horoscope of Bitcoin, because given this drain from the Coldcard wallet and its implications, I think it is particularly quite important if you are into Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know a great deal about Bitcoin, but I just wanted to look at the horoscopes because there's something quite sort of interesting going on. And another thing, I just hit 15,000 subscribers. I mean, I know 15,000 subscribers, isn't great, but it's pretty small in the grand scheme of things. But it's taken a long time, but I finally made that round number. So thank you very much for your support, and thank you very much for subscribing to my videos. So anyway, let's start off by looking at the horoscope for today. So here is a chart set for noon today, Tuesday, August the 4th, 2026, New York time. And the moon is in late Aries, so you can see it's at 24 degrees Aries. So yesterday it was in Aries. Yesterday it was making trine to the Sun, trine to Jupiter. Then it made a conjunction to Saturn. So at the beginning of the day, the moon was pretty close to the conjunction of Saturn. Then, the moon, moved on, and the moon in Aries, it's making a semi-square to Uranus. Then it moved on to make a square to Mercury. So moon square Mercury, that can really stir things up. And although moon square Mercury is quite a common aspect, it's always happening. Every couple of weeks you've got moon square Mercury. It can be quite irritating. Particularly moon in Aries. So moon in Aries, likes to express its opinion. It likes to storm forward. And then there's Mercury in Cancer. Mercury in Cancer is quite an emotional placement for Mercury. It can be quite defensive. Cancer is a defensive sign. And so with moon square Mercury, it might be a case of feeling defensive, feeling that some of our beliefs are under attack, in quite a sort of a minor way, just this sort of little criticisms and having to justify what we're doing. And then the moon having made a square to Mercury, it moves on and makes a sextile to Mars. And so I think that Moon sextile Mars, is a good aspect, and it's an aspect that knows how to look after itself. So you might get the idea of, you have the Moon square Mercury, that is the challenge. You have to justify what you're doing. You have to justify what you believe in. You perhaps have to start to defend your truth. And then with Moon sextile Mars, that's perhaps when you can be defensive. Perhaps you can go further from being defensive. You can actually take the initiative. And Mars is in Gemini, so Mars is in Gemini is obviously a pretty verbal placement for Mars, and Mars will continue to be in Gemini until I think it's is it August the 11th. I think it moves out, it moves into Cancer. So Moon sextile Mars may be about just being able to really stand firm in terms of what we believe in, and perhaps to be able to stand firm in quite a verbal way. So this Moon sextile Mars, it takes place at 2:51 p.m. No, sorry, let's get this right. This Moon sextile Mars, it takes place at 7:51 in the evening if you're in the UK. So a bit later if you're in continental Europe. If you're in New York Standard Time is Eastern Standard Time is it takes place at 2:51 in the afternoon, which would be 11:51 in the morning if you're in California. So whether you're in America or Europe, the moon is making a sextile to Mars. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, that Moon sextile Mars won't be until tomorrow. But with that Moon sextile Mars, it is a good aspect. It's a talented aspect, and you don't have to fly off the handle with Moon sextile Mars. But you can look after yourself, and particularly Moon in Aries and Mars in Gemini. You put those together, and you get a real sort of verbal dynamism, which you can use to defend yourself, but not in a way that I think is particularly dangerous. And because it's verbal, if someone is attacking what you believe in, you can give as good as you get. And then the moon does move into Taurus. Perhaps if you're in the Americas, the moon moves into Taurus. So that sign change takes place. When does it take place? The moon moves into Taurus at 10:35 this evening Eastern, which would be 7:35 this evening in California. So this evening, if you are in the Americas, the moon moving out of Aries and into Taurus, it just might create a change. The moon is moving into a sign where it is exalted. It does make a conjunction to Chiron in Taurus. I think I'll talk about that conjunction in tomorrow's video. But with moon in Taurus, perhaps things start to stabilize, and there's less sort of pointless thinking, pointless talking. Things are just more down to earth. And there are a couple of other things I want to talk about. I do want to just briefly look at the Vedic chart, and I also want to look at Bitcoin. But first of all, I just want to turn this chart to Australia. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is going to be at 16 Aries at the beginning of the day. So that not at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day if you're in Sydney, Australia. So the moon making a sextile to Mars in the end. The moon gets there in the end, but that moon sextile Mars that I've been talking about, which I think is a very good aspect, I don't think that aspect does not take place until tomorrow. And as far as what the main aspect is, you are in Australia or New Zealand, I would have said the main aspect is a conjunction to Saturn. So in Australasia, it could be quite a Moon-Saturn day, particularly this morning. You feel that there are things that are quite serious, but just because it's serious doesn't mean it's bad. I think there are things that are worth thinking about, worth spending your time on, and things shouldn't necessarily be trivialized. And as far as the heliocentric view, I mustn't forget about that. So if we look at the positions of the planets with the sun at the center of the solar system, then we have Mercury starting to move towards a trine of Venus. So there's Mercury at 19 degrees Aries, making a trine of Venus. Now that Mercury trine Venus is going to be around for quite a few days, and with Mercury trine Venus, it might be the case. It's a time for perhaps being able to talk. I think it is quite a communicative time for us, and it just should be easy to talk about the things that are important to us. And additionally, Mercury is it's kind of making a micro aspect to Pluto, a 15 degree series to Pluto. So we can talk about things, but there is a seriousness perhaps to what we say, and there are things that we ourselves regard as important. But I think that's about it. I don't think there is actually a huge amount to report, and just don't forget that this Jupiter-Pluto opposition is still in force, geocentrically and heliocentrically. And for many of us, through August, it is a time for just not being satisfied with the way we are. Things could always be better. We don't want to be obsessed about it, but just things could be better, and they could be even better, perhaps. And so keep trying, keep transforming, and keep looking for sort of new opportunities to improve what you are doing. And then there is the Vedic picture. I don't do this very often, but what we have here, this is a chart. This is a chart set in the Vedic using the Vedic signs. In other words, I'm taking 24 degrees off all the signs using the Lari Ayanamsha. And this is set for 12:24 in the afternoon, around lunchtime in New York. And why I've chosen that time is the time in which the moon goes into sidereal Aries. And in Vedic astrology, the moon going to sidereal Aries, is important. The moon, for a start, is a Gandanta, and the moon is Gandanta when it is at 0 degrees Aries. It means that it's like on a knot. I think that's what Gandanta means. And it's right at the end of the water signs, beginning of the fire signs, the moon is Gandanta. And it can be quite a difficult and troubling time. I have got my moon when I was born was Gandanta. I think that my moon in Vedic astrology is at 29 degrees Pisces, and it's 22 degrees Aries Western. But Gandanta can be difficult, and it can be a time when things don't necessarily work particularly well. I mean, I think my own moon is a bit of a mess, being Gandanta, and so take it easily with Gandanta. This is a time of change, and so we mustn't feel that we necessarily have to initiate anything today, because it might not entirely work. And of course, we shouldn't forget that the moon is waning. It is. We've got a new moon coming up. In about just over a week. It's a big new moon. It's a total eclipse. But when the moon is waning, yeah, it's not a great time to be starting things off. And now today, Gandanta, yeah, we've hit that knot, we've hit that changeover, and that's why today could be a little bit troublesome. And we have had some sign changes going on, or sign changes which are about to happen. So look at Mercury from a Vedic perspective. Mercury is still in Gemini, but Mercury in the Vedic chart is about to leave Gemini and enter Cancer. So that does give a different perspective. So many of us have been concerned about Mercury being in Cancer and being retrograde and not being in a good position. Of course, from a Vedic perspective, it's been in Gemini all along. It's in its own sign all along. And in Vedic astrology, retrograde isn't such a bad thing necessarily. It doesn't quite have the same status in as it does in Western astrology. And likewise, we've had Mars just changing sign, moving out of Taurus and into Gemini, and Venus has just changed sign. So from a Vedic view, this quite possibly around now is a time of change because of those sign changes. And of course today is Gandanta, so the moon is Gandanta, so perhaps some of us are feeling a little bit vulnerable, and perhaps we're on the cusp of something, from a Vedic perspective. And now I wanted to look at Bitcoin. If you're not interested in Bitcoin, you don't have to watch this section, but I just found it interesting. I looked at the Bitcoin chart a few weeks ago, and Bitcoin definitely has a chart, because Bitcoin entered the blockchain, or the blockchain started at a particular time, on January the 3rd, 2009, at a particular time, at 6:15 p.m. And what I really wanted to look at with the Bitcoin chart, and I really wanted to focus on, is the moon. I mean, that was what I was talking about earlier. So if you remember, we were talking about Barbo's fan, or Barbo's basket, all these planets at 4 degrees. We had Uranus at 4 degrees Gemini, Neptune at 4 degrees Aries. We had Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius. We had Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo, and so it was all hitting Bitcoin. And I certainly noticed this, and I certainly wasn't the first person to notice this. I think I saw this YouTube video. I think it was a Bitcoin conference where they had some people talking about astrology and how exciting it was that you're going to have all these planets at 4 degrees, and again, Barbo's basket strikes. But I think they were seeing Barbo's basket in quite a positive way, and I certainly pointed this out. I mean, I didn't express an opinion about how I thought it would manifest, but now we see what has happened, and what has happened is there is a particular wallet, and and a wallet is a way of storing the keys to your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin, if you own Bitcoin, it's on the blockchain. You gain access to the Bitcoin through this wallet, and the idea of a wallet, one of the things a wallet does is it creates a random seed. So it creates a string of random numbers, and I think you have I think it's able to create all these 24 words, and they're very unique, and so the chances of someone being able to hack those 24 words by chance are basically zero. At least that's the theory. I mean, of course, it's not zero, and quantum computing might make a difference. But the trouble with the Coldcard wallet was that there was a particular version that people using the wallet, they thought they'd created a set of completely random numbers, but they weren't as random as the device was claiming, because the randomization process had been short-circuited, and I don't know the precise details, but it was instead using a software randomization process which was relatively predictable. And someone had recently realized that there was a bug in the Coldcard wallet, in the firmware it was using. I think at the beginning of the decade, was it 2021? And having realized that bug, they realized that there was a limit to how many there was a limit to how many seeds could be produced, and so they were able to do that, and they were able to hack the wallet and many wallets, and I don't know, is it $80 million, $90 million have been taken. I mean, perhaps a relatively small amount, but it's created a new vulnerability for those holding Bitcoin and holding their own Bitcoin, and suddenly it's vulnerable. What if someone in the future were to be able to hack their wallet just by guessing numbers? So it's a major issue for Bitcoin. So the hack, when money started leaving accounts, it happened at a precise time. I don't know about the location, but this is the time it happened. It started at 1:10 a.m. Universal Time on the 30th, which is 2:10 a.m. On sort of London time. So it doesn't really matter where the location is. So the ascendant doesn't matter. I don't know where the ascendant. I don't know where you take the place as, but the positions of the planets are relevant. And as far as Barbo's basket is concerned, you can see that you've still got planets at 4. You've got Pluto at 4 degrees 13 Aquarius. You've got Neptune at 4 degrees 17 Aquarius. You've got Uranus at 4 degrees 57 Gemini. Jupiter has moved on. It's now at 6 degrees Leo. So we can put this side by side with the Bitcoin chart. And the moon is in Aquarius, and the moon is on Bitcoin's descendant. So in a couple of few hours before the attack, the moon was moving on to Bitcoin's ascendant. So you could say that represents an attack. It represents a vulnerability, Bitcoin's enemies, or someone really sort of attacking the system. And as far as all the planets at 4 degrees of the sign are concerned, Neptune was at 4 degrees 17 Aries. So relatively recently, Neptune was on Bitcoin's moon, and it's still pretty close. Uranus was making a sextile to the moon. Pluto was also making a sextile to the moon. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were hitting Bitcoin's moon. So if you look at what was happening to Bitcoin over the last few weeks, it certainly wasn't going up a huge amount, and it seems to have culminated with this major attack. It's not like that the attack is necessarily going to destroy Bitcoin or anything like that. Okay, it's damaged its reputation, and you can see it's damaged its reputation because Bitcoin has its north node. But actually, Bitcoin's got its north node. Has it done it? Bitcoin's north node is at 10 degrees Aquarius. So the moon had just gone over Bitcoin's north node. I don't know. No, maybe that's not about reputation. I mean, north node in Aquarius is about technology. Moon in Aquarius is about technology. And so, you could argue with the moon on Bitcoin's north node, maybe this is actually a good thing, because in the Bitcoin world, they were sort of worrying about quantum computing, but they were saying, well, that's not going to be for a few more years. But probably this attack is going to mean that the whole thing is going to be fast forward. And now everyone involved in Bitcoin, the software designers and so forth, are now going to feel they're going to have to make Bitcoin quantum proof really as soon as possible, given this attack. So this attack may, in the long run, could actually strengthen Bitcoin, and maybe this is indicated here because having Uranus and Pluto sextile its moon, that could be a plus. It really changes things. Having Neptune on the moon, that kind of dissolves things as well. And what's happening is the seed has been dissolved, at least the seed being held on the Coldcard wallets, and additionally, Venus is conjunct Saturn. So Venus hitting Saturn. So there is a Saturn-Uranus opposition in Bitcoin's chart. And so Venus is kind of triggering the Saturn. And you could say that Saturn in Virgo represents some of the obsessive detail that is necessary to secure Bitcoin in a safe way. And so Venus in Virgo hitting its Saturn, there's just a huge amount of detail to deal with, and Venus is additionally opposition Bitcoin's Uranus. But it's also Saturn that is of interest to me. Now, Bitcoin has its moon at 4 degrees Aries in its Western chart. In its Eastern chart, Bitcoin has its moon at 4 degrees Pisces. And from an Eastern perspective, Saturn is in Pisces. So in fact, I can show you what I mean. So here's Bitcoin's chart from a Western perspective. So if I take this Bitcoin's chart and I turn it into a Vedic chart, there you go. You see, everything has gone back a sign, and there's the moon. The moon is now at 10 degrees Pisces. So if we look at today's Vedic chart, I'm taking today's Vedic chart. I'm not looking at the chart of the attack. Well, I could actually look at if I take the Coldcard attack at the time of the attack, and likewise I turn that into a. If I turn that into a Vedic chart, I can show you that Saturn is in the same sign as Bitcoin's moon. In other words, right now Bitcoin has Sadi-Sati. So Sadi-Sati is when Saturn is in the same sign as the moon, as a natal moon, or the sign after the moon, or the sign before the moon. So we have a situation where Saturn is causing Bitcoin a lot of problems, potentially for quite a long time, because the thing about the Sadi-Sati is that it can last for 7 years. So these are all sidereal charts, Eastern charts. So there's Bitcoin's moon in Pisces, in sidereal Pisces. There's Saturn in sidereal Pisces. So Saturn is in the same sign as Bitcoin's moon, and I believe that Saturn went into the sign of Bitcoin's moon in the spring of 2025, and it will stay there, I think, until June of 2027. So that immediate phase of Sadi-Sati, because Sadi-Sati is a Vedic concept for a Saturn affliction. So this immediate phase is going to last until June of next year. And if you look at what's been happening to Bitcoin in that period, it has basically underperformed. From the spring of 2025, it wasn't going up as much as people were hoping, and then in October 2025, it completely crashed and it went down in value by 50% over a period of months. And so Bitcoin has not been behaving as people expected. And so that's kind of not surprising that Saturn is in the same sign as Bitcoin's moon. And it is a real affliction. So Sadi-Sati maybe doesn't just apply to people. It can apply to currencies as well. Now, I'm not making any forecasts about what's going to happen now with the price. You could say that Saturn has made the conjunction with Bitcoin's moon. It's not going to make that conjunction again, so it could be that things are going to be improving from now on. It might be that one has to wait until June 2027 for Bitcoin, for Saturn to sort of move out of the sign of Bitcoin's moon. In other words, for Saturn to move into sidereal Aries. Now, if you take a wider view of Sadi-Sati, Sadi-Sati is when Saturn is not just in the sign of the moon, but it's in a sign before the moon sign, and after the moon sign. So that would be while Saturn was in in sidereal Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. So if you take a longer view, you might then say that the Sadi period for Bitcoin doesn't actually end until April 2030. That's not what people were expecting. But perhaps if you regard Bitcoin as being a commodity, like wheat and metals and so forth, they have their cycles. Sometimes these cycles last a long time. So if you wanted to be really pessimistic about Sadi, you might want to wait. Maybe Bitcoin needs to wait until 2030 before it's really got itself together. I don't know. I must make it clear I'm not making any forecasts about the Bitcoin price. I'm just looking at the charts. Anyway, now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, August the 4th, 2026. Aries. In many respects, you are right in the center of things, if that is at all possible. You have a good appreciation of what is happening, kind of like I was saying yesterday. I mean, I think a lot of us have a good idea, if we're honest, about what really is going on around us, and we do have to be honest. There are some things going on which we don't always appreciate, but it's important to be able to focus on the truth. And we have our own perceptions and ideas about what this truth means, and it's not like one truth is better than the other. I mean, okay, some things are objectively true, but a lot of things are just a matter of opinion, and they're true for us. And Aries, maybe that's what you need to hold on to, and it's not necessarily about anyone being right or wrong. It just might be about respecting other people's viewpoint. And as far as today is concerned, this is kind of demonstrated just by this continuing influence of Saturn being in your sign. Of course, Saturn has been in your sign for a long time, for 6 months or so. How long ago was middle of February? With Saturn in your sign, that means to an extent you are able to take yourself seriously, and of course now that Saturn has just gone stationary retrograde. Okay, I know that it went stationary retrograde some time ago, but it's still pretty slow. It's still pretty close to being at a standstill. It's just moving backwards at an almost sort of glacial pace. And at the beginning of the day, the moon was making a conjunction to Saturn. So that does emphasize the fact that you are holding firm to the things that you believe in, and that you are able to really look after yourself. I mean, if there is any resistance, if you have to defend your position, I think that is something that you very much can do. After all, the moon is making a sextile to Mars. There's not a huge amount going on today astrologically, but that moon sextile Mars perhaps is a standout, and the moon sextile to Mars, I think, is it's the last aspect the moon makes in Aries before leaving the sign, at least the last major aspect. And so that means, Aries, that if you need to push your point of view, you certainly can, and you can do it with a certain amount of talent. It's not just about just having a sort of an over-the-top argument where you force your point of view home. No, it's not like that at all. I think that you can use your words. I mean, don't forget Mars is in Gemini. Mars is still in Gemini. Okay, Mars is going to move into Cancer, pretty soon. But while it's in Gemini, while the moon in Aries is sextile Mars in Gemini, this is a time when you really can hold on to things, and really tell people what is important, if necessary. But it needn't be about a conflict. There might be, a bit of toing and froing. It's a good day for having an animated conversation. When I think Aries, you really talk about most things. It shouldn't be difficult. You've always got something to say. I don't think that you're going to be lost for words. But before the moon makes that sextile to Mars, it does make a square to Mercury. And moon square Mercury, there is some agitation, in that aspect. Moon square Mercury can feel that it has to say something. It has to get its point of view across, especially if you feel that your vital interests are in any way under threat or being questioned or being dismissed. You can say what is important, and then so the moon makes that square to Mercury, and then it moves on and makes the sextile to Mars, and all the while you are just aware of what is important. Different things are important to different people, but what is important to you, and in many ways you can share your views and share your vision even, and I think that this means that you can indeed be in the center of things. And if someone hasn't got a view, or they don't know what to do next, or they don't know what to think, well, perhaps you can help them out there. But you don't want to be too domineering, and maybe you will function best in a vacuum. I mean, not your vacuum, perhaps other people's vacuum. If no one knows what to do, if no one knows what to think, well, Aries, you're quite capable of stepping in, filling in the gap. And so that might be something you want to do, something that you might feel sort of gently sort of amuses you. But it's still worth your while just being aware of other people's weaknesses. I mean, you yourself, as I've kind of suggested in this piece, you're in a relatively strong position, but some other people are a bit listless. They don't quite know where they're going. They know that a change has happened, but they can't really quite see it through. And you might be just a bit too much for some people. You're just perhaps maybe too full of yourself, too sure of yourself even. And so it would be a good idea today, if you showed some respect for other people's sensitivities, and you kind of realize that they have their own way of doing things, and maybe they're not going at quite your pace, and so that they need time, and yes, they need space as well. But overall, Aries, I think it is a day when you have a considerable amount of strength, and you do know how to defend yourself and also to project yourself as well. Taurus. The moon will eventually go into Taurus, probably tomorrow. Now, if you're in California, it will, in fact, all of America, not just California. This evening the moon will go into Taurus, but it is really late. I mean, New York time, the moon goes into Taurus, I think at 22:35. What's that? 10:35 in the evening. That would be 7:35 in the evening in California. So this evening in the Americas, there might be a change as the moon moves into your sign, and you might feel sort of more definite and more able to sort of be yourself and step out into the limelight. But it does happen late in the day, and that's in the Americas. And and for other Taurians, well, the moon is going to be in Aries, all day, and So in that situation, then you shouldn't feel obliged. You know, you might feel that you kind of ought to do something, but I don't think you do. And if you want to bide your time, Taurus, then I think that is okay. I mean, it's an option. It's not like there's only one way of doing things. There are several approaches, and it is true that there are going to be some Taurians who feel that they should be doing something. It's like the world is pushing you in a particular direction, and there are certain things you just know, you just understand. It's quite clear to you. But just because something is clear to you, it doesn't mean that you should rush out and talk about it, push any particular point of view. Maybe that can just wait until later, and do think about what's going on with Venus, which is your ruler. Venus is now in really very late Virgo. I mean, it's not doing a great deal. It's almost kind of waiting to change sign. And it's on Thursday that Venus moves into Libra, but you're moving to the end of something and the start of something new. And so while you're in that state, then why push yourself harder than you need to? And it just might be the case that it's best to just allow things to develop in their own way, and not feel that there is any massive pressure. But in your own way, you can do things which are useful for you. And like yesterday, I don't think that they really have to be revealed. It may well be the case, in fact, Taurus, that you're on best form when you are just away from it all, when you don't have to worry about other people and their problems. And Venus it's still square Mars, and this Venus Mars square is it is separating. It's not as powerful as it used to be, but it's still a thing. And if you are too close to any one person, you could just feel the pressure, and you can also sort of feel their particular level of tension. Some people are tense, and some people are expressing that tension through the things they say, through the things they suggest. Even their judgments are created through their own tension. Everyone has a judgment, everyone has an opinion, but when people are feeling tense, they feel they just have to say something, have to give you their view. And other people's views, do you actually need them right now? Well, probably not. They just make things more confusing than need be. And fundamentally, Taurus, you know how it all works. You know what's important to you. You know what is good for you, and you know what you enjoy. And so, given all that, there's probably no reason to make a huge effort. So that might be your day. Now, is everyone going to be useless, or even worse than useless? No, I don't think so. One aspect we do have is a sextile between the Moon and Mars, and this Moon-Mars sextile might indicate that someone could be useful, but it would have to be in a very specific situation. So there might be something that is important to you, something that needs to be resolved, and one person can sort it out. And it might be you just need to spend 10 minutes with them. You need to get an opinion. You need to get some advice, but it's probably something quite practical. It's something that is maybe, holding you back, and, different people have different specializations, and what you can perhaps rely on is someone's particular expertise, particular talent. You have your own abilities, but you can't be good at everything, and you kind of know that there's just one area where there is a gap, and so seeking out that person who has the knowledge could make a big difference. I mean, this person might be a professional, so maybe you're seeking out professional advice, or it could be someone you know well. Could be a member of your family who does have some sort of specialized knowledge, specialized experience that just has something useful to offer. But once you've got what you want, you don't have to just continue worrying about this other person. Perhaps you can say that people have their role today, and people can play that role very quickly, in a period of minutes, not even hours, and once that role is done, then you can move on. And what is important, Taurus, is that you're able to be quite self-contained, and that you're aware of what's happening around you, for sure. And I think that you do have strong opinions about where it's all going, but maybe today isn't the time to be expressing these opinions, or for really feeling that you have to be out there making things happen, being persuasive. I think you can leave that for another day. Gemini. It is possible, Gemini, to be ever so slightly confused. Now, as a Gemini, you probably pride yourself on your intellect, and how clever and versatile you are. I mean, you're a Gemini after all. Well, I'm a Gemini. I've got my sun in Gemini, and so I do understand that. But you can't expect to be on brilliant form all day, every day. And yeah, there might be times today where some things, if you're really honest with yourself, don't make a lot of sense. And the more you try to work out what's going on, the more difficult it might be. And so it's fine to be confused. Nothing wrong with being confused. It's a state that many Geminis can often find themselves in, but they keep asking questions, and maybe the confusion can be resolved. But if you are confused and you then try to do something practical, well, obviously that would not necessarily work well. And so if you feel sure about something today, Gemini, well, maybe you should just, question yourself. Have you really worked it out? And things can make it more complicated. Things can be made more complicated by other people, for example. You socialize, you listen, you move from one person to another. You get their opinions, and there may be moments where things do seem clear, or at least maybe it's because other people seem to be clear of them. They seem to know what they're talking about. But that can be a problem. There can be a danger that you have the opinion of the last person you talked to, the last person you got advice from. That would not be a good idea, and it's just not really fitting for the average Gemini. So you're not in a position where you can really know what the truth really is. And I said in a broad sense that this video is about defending your truth, and that assumes that you have a truth. And sometimes with Geminis, the truth can be up in the air. And when the truth is up in the air, that can be a dangerous time, because you might be tempted to take on board someone else's truth, or some truth that you almost sort of bought in a box. Yeah, you can buy truth in a box. It's rather like sort of IKEA. You buy something and you just put it together, and you don't have to really think about it too much. And that's not the way it should be. So really, Gemini, it might be a good idea if you had a reasonably open mind. So you can be yourself. You can be as sociable as you like today, if that's what you want to do. But it's not about making decisions. It's not about listening to what anyone is saying too hard, particularly if they're saying something important or appears to be important. If they're sort of pushing a view on you, you just take it as a possibility, and maybe you can afford to be more definite later in the week. But now that's not really the right approach. And if you try your hardest to give something everything you've got, to be definite, then it's still possible it might not work, because there's just confusion is always there. And it is a temporary confusion. I'm not saying it's going to be like this all the time. And don't forget, I've got my sun in Gemini, so I'm not sort of picking on you or saying something negative, just for the sake of it. I think that you just have to be aware that that things are in flux, and that you don't fully understand what's going on. Okay, you understand what's going on in a very sort of personal way, in terms of your own world. But as soon as you start to engage other people, and you try to listen to them, and you try to work out where they're going, it is confusing. And getting outside opinions, and outside advice probably just could be almost dangerous. And this might apply particularly to money. Mercury is moving through Cancer. Mercury is your ruler. And Mercury is moving towards the end of Cancer, and that does mean that some Geminis are thinking about money. And if you're thinking about money, that might mean that you're thinking about what other people have to say about money. But with Moon making a square to Mercury, that just could be that there is a bit of the financial annoyance. Now, that financial annoyance could potentially happen without anyone's help. It just happens because there's something you're thinking about of a financial nature, and that sort of bothers you. But then the Moon, having made that square to Mercury, it does make a sextile to Mars. So Moon sextile Mars is in fact the last aspect the Moon makes before it changes sign. And that Moon sextile Mars could be quite constructive. So if there is just something you feel you want to do, you're not based on decisions, rather it's just something that needs to be done, and you feel that you want to assert yourself in one particular area. Again, it's not on the basis of a sudden decision. Action based on a sudden decision is unlikely to work out. It could backfire. But if it's just something that you've always known you had to do it, and you need to make your position clear on something, then that Moon sextile Mars does mean that you can look after yourself. But really, the action should be coming out from you onto the outside. You don't want to be in a situation where you're negotiating, where you're trying to handle what one person is saying, what another person is saying, and you're trying to work it all out, and you're trying to take the initiative as well. That might not work out. So you can be useful today, and there can be sort of gentle and constructive action, but you certainly don't want to do anything on the spur of the moment. Cancer. Mercury is still in your sign. I thought I should remind you of that. Mercury is not going to stay in your sign forever. It leaves Cancer and moves into Leo at the end of a week on Sunday. So we could say that the Cancer season is finally and absolutely coming to an end this week. And so, while Mercury is in your sign, I would use it. With Mercury in Cancer, you have a natural ability to express your view, tell people about your truth. We all have our particular view of the truth. And being a Cancerian, that view is very strong. You definitely are someone who has strong beliefs, which you are absolutely not prepared to compromise. And the Moon in Aries is makes a square to Mercury, and then it makes a sextile to Mars. So Moon square Mercury, I think that aspect, could well be important, because in a way it's one of the last aspects before Mercury leaves the sign. Mercury is what's Mercury doing? I mean, Mercury is applying to a sextile of Venus. That is true. Maybe you're starting to feel that, but that aspect, is not going to be exact until later on in the month. So it's not something immediate, and furthermore, the aspect will take place after the sign change, because with Mercury is about to change sign, and Venus is going to change sign earlier. Venus changes sign in 2 days' time on Thursday. So with Mercury in Cancer now, use it. It's there for you. And with Moon square Mercury, this is one of the last aspects involving Mercury. I mean, it may even be the last aspect, at least the last hard dynamic aspect, square, opposition, conjunction involving the Moon and Mercury before the sign change. And the dynamism of that Moon square Mercury, I think actually could be quite useful. And, this is especially the case if you are working, or perhaps if you're looking for a job, you're trying to make an impression. I think that you really do understand what's going on, and it's not just that the Moon is making a square to Mercury, it's the fact that the Moon is making a conjunction to Saturn. So the day starts with a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn, and with that Moon conjunct Saturn, I think that you have a certain sense of responsibility. You just know that there are things that you have to do, and to begin with, you might not want to talk about them. It's just there. And this is especially the case if you have any kind of authority. You just know that there are things that you are responsible for, and if you have a feeling of responsibility, then the question is, what do you do about it? How do you communicate it? And I think that you can. And so if you want to even tell people what to do. I think you can be quite reasonable about it, but you can be persistent, and it's not necessarily going to be 100% easy because the moon is square Mercury, but you can get people to listen, and once people listen to you, they realize that you are right, and then I think that they will, broadly speaking, just do what is expected of them. So don't doubt your own power. I mean, there's no need to be too pushy. It's not like you have to be a mini dictator. It's because you understand the way things work. You know what needs to be done. And then the moon having made a square to Mercury, it makes a sextile to Mars. And in fact, moon sextile Mars is arguably the main aspect of the day. It happens. When does it happen? It happens at sort of 2:51 in the afternoon, New York time. It's a bit earlier, late morning if you're in California. If you're in Europe, that will be this evening. And so the moon is moving towards this sextile to Mars, and even if the moon sextile Mars is over, if you're in California, then it's still present, and it allows you to take action, on many different levels. But it's a kind of action that it requires, a certain amount of skill and concentration on your part, and you have to know when is the right time to do something. But once you get going on something and something is important, and this doesn't have to involve other people now. It's just something that that you have to do in your own quiet way, and you get it done, and then you can move on. Then at the end of the day, we've got potentially the moon moving into Taurus. Well, if you're in the Americas, if you're not in the Americas, the moon does not move into Taurus. Okay, maybe if you're in Tahiti, the moon will move into Taurus, but I don't know how many of you are in Tahiti. But this evening, New York time, that's 10:35 in the evening, which would be 7:35 in the evening in California. That there is a sign change. Moon moves out of Aries into Taurus, and I think that when the moon moves into Taurus, probably things feel better. There's less pressure, and of course when the moon moves into Taurus, it moves into the sign of its exaltation. It does make a conjunction to Chiron, but maybe that's something I can talk about tomorrow. But I think that just perhaps there's less pressure on you, less responsibility, and perhaps you have a chance to be more relaxed and feel that it's not all down to you. Leo, the moon is in a fire sign, like it was yesterday, and the moon was yesterday making what was it doing yesterday? It was making trines to the Sun and Jupiter. I mean, I think that those aspects involving the Sun and Jupiter are in a way still there. I mean, Aries and Leo, are two signs that they're both fire signs, and you've got planets in both signs, and I think that you do feel that, even though the moon is moving away from that trine to the Sun and Jupiter, and having both the moon in Aries and the Sun in Leo. The Sun and the Moon, the two sort of most important points in the sky, two most important bodies in the sky. Both in fire signs. I do feel that is healthy. I mean, it's healthy for you. It's life affirming, and you're feeling. I think in general, quite good about yourself. And so, you don't want anything to spoil it. To just, carry on enjoying life. If you're not enjoying life, well, I think that maybe you're taking something too seriously. The moon, sure, it does make that trine to the sun, and it moves towards a sextile of Mars. It does make a square to Mercury, and Moon square Mercury could be something just bothering you, something small that you almost see sort of in the corner of your eye. It might be just a thought. You think about something, and it won't quite go away. And maybe this has been building up, over the last few weeks. Something that you kind of thought you had to address, that you didn't really want to address, and it might be difficult to talk about. But with Moon square Mercury, something small could be trying to spoil your day, but it shouldn't spoil your day, because the moon, having made that square to Mercury, it does make a sextile to Mars, and the moon sextile Mars is in fact the last aspect the moon makes, at least certainly the last major aspect the moon makes before leaving the sign. Okay, the moon does make a quincunx to Venus, but I don't regard the quincunx as a major aspect. And so moon sextile Mars is about you potentially enjoying yourself, seeing what is available. If you are with other people, I think that you can be quite dynamic and forward thinking, and hopefully ready to express your view, and perhaps even demonstrate how you've been trying to negotiate with the truth. I mean, the truth, I think, is of some importance at the moment. When you've got planets in fire signs, fire signs can be about the truth. Now, that might sound strange. What is it with fire signs and the truth? Well, the thing about the truth is it either is or it isn't, and it's obvious. I mean, it might not seem obvious, and I know that different people have their own truths, but it's obvious for the beholder of the truth. And when you've got moon in Aries, sun in Leo, and the moon having made a conjunction to Saturn, moon had recently made a trine to Jupiter, things just might become apparent just like that to you. Of course, it's your truth, but it is obvious to you. And with the moon sextile Mars, when I talk about defend your truth, that's certainly something you can do. That's certainly something you really can hold on to. And in fact, that might be how that square to Mercury works, because the moon makes a square to Mercury, and then it moves to a sextile of Mars. So moon square Mercury might represent a moment of indecision, or a moment when you are perhaps being challenged and you're not quite sure what to do, you're not quite sure how to respond, you might feel you're on the spot, and then moon sextile Mars, that's it. You realize that you can look after yourself after all. So it will come together. So if you're feeling ever so slightly pressured, don't worry about it. You're able to hold on to what you believe in, and you just keep going, and you don't have to keep going for long. You can almost sort of trust yourself to be decisive, and in particular you can trust yourself to look after some of your fundamental beliefs. Now, right at the end of the day in the Americas, the moon does change sign. So this evening, moon moves out of Aries and into Taurus. Now, I don't really want to talk very much about that, because really that says something about about tomorrow, Wednesday. And of course, it is specific to those of you in the Americas. But when the moon does move into Taurus, I think that you have a sort of a new decisiveness, and it occurs to you that something has to be done, and something has to be projected out there, into the world that that is relevant to your ambitions. So if you are in the Americas this evening, don't necessarily just slack off and feel the day is over. If you're for example, if you're on the East Coast, the moon moves into Taurus at 10:35 in the evening. Okay, you may have gone to bed by 10:35 in the evening, but if you haven't gone to bed, if you're a night owl, then Taurus, there may be things that you suddenly realize that you want to get involved in, that you want to think about, you want to plan. So that's perhaps something that you should be leaving open. So just because it's getting dark, it doesn't mean that it's all over. And so So there is a change right at the end, and I think that tomorrow, Wednesday, could be quite different from today when every Taurus, regardless of where they are, when every Leo, regardless of where they are, gets to feel the moon in Taurus, which is it's a good place for the moon to be, particularly if you are a Leo. Virgo. Venus is still in Virgo, but it is getting ready to leave the sign. I mean, Venus is at 27 degrees 50 Virgo, so you've just got a couple of days left before Venus moves out of Virgo and into Libra. But don't worry. The Virgo season hasn't even started, so you might perhaps be sad that Venus is leaving your sign, but the Sun and Mercury are going to be in Virgo, sooner rather than later. The end of a month, you've got the Sun in Virgo, you've got Mercury in Virgo, so don't worry. There are things coming into your sign, pretty soon. But while Venus is in late Virgo, it might be that there is something that needs to be wrapped up, something that needs to be said, something that needs to be expressed. And if you've kind of half got your message across, well, now might be the time to see it through. But also you shouldn't feel that you have to say too much, particularly if you're dealing with things which are controversial or important, because I think there is a problem, Virgo, that certain things could, in some respects, confuse you. You'd like things to be straightforward. Maybe particularly while Venus is moving through your sign, you want things to be really sort of cut and dry. Everything is in place. You know what's going on. Everything is in order. That is the way it should be. But I'm afraid some things just aren't clear, and you try to understand them, but you don't fully reach any conclusions. So I said that today might be about defending your truth, but then you have to ask what exactly is your truth. And I think we all have our own subjective truths which are important, but it might still feel that the truth is being still negotiated. So if you take action, particularly on a verbal level, you might find that you don't necessarily know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're arguing for. You don't know what you're advocating for, and that could put you in a difficult position. So I would perhaps hold back on your opinions. I mean, you have your opinions, you have your viewpoint, but if it's under pressure, then you might find that you're not really too sure of yourself. I mean, it's a temporary situation. I must emphasize this. It really is temporary. And, if you look at Mercury, at the end of a week, Mercury moves into Leo. Now that's kind of interesting. It's quite a mixed picture, Mercury moving into Leo. But in some respects, Mercury moving into Leo is going to strengthen you, because Mercury, when it moves into Leo, it does start making a conjunction to Jupiter. On the other hand, with Mercury in Leo, there may be still things that you do want to keep to yourself, and so that's something that you perhaps need to be thinking about. And as far as today is concerned, other aspects, yes, there is a square between the Moon and Mercury. And Virgo, the Moon and Mercury, it could complicate things, and other people could complicate things. And if you're trying to keep things simple, then you certainly don't want to deal with complicated things in a public arena. And you might think that it is best to be open, best to discuss things, but very often that's not the case. And some things, at least in the short term, are perhaps best kept to yourself. And you don't want to necessarily explain your workings. So, if you are doing something and you're feeling good about it, and then you have to explain yourself, well, that could just spoil it, and that could make you less effective. But the last aspect the Moon makes, at least the last major aspect the Moon makes before leaving the sign, before moving into Taurus, is a sextile to Mars. And this Moon sextile Mars, I would regard that as being pretty constructive. Mars is still in Gemini, and Gemini, as is a pretty high profile part of your chart. And so with the Moon sextile Mars, if need be, you really know how to apply yourself, and this is especially in a public setting. In terms of, for example, your work or your career, and you know how to express yourself. But I don't think I'm talking about anything verbal. I mean, if you're being too verbal, well, that could kind of weaken you. It's more about what you do. It's about action rather than words. Even though Mars is in Gemini, I think that you should really try to focus on the action side of Mars rather than the verbal side. So you decide deep down that something is important. You don't actually decide today that something is important. You've known for some time that something is important, and then you take the opportunity now to actually act on it. If, on the other hand, you were suddenly to decide today that you wanted to do something, probably you shouldn't do it, because I think that your ability to actually make decisions today is not necessarily very good, but your ability to act on decisions you've already made is good. And so you do have to make that distinction. And if you are doing something or about to do something, ask yourself why you are doing it. Ask yourself when you made the decision to take action. And if you'd already made the decision days, weeks ago, then that's okay. But what you don't want to do is have a sudden change of plan, or think you suddenly get it, you suddenly realize what needs to be done, and then you act on it straight away. I don't think that would work out. So do do bear that in mind, and do make that distinction. Now, it's possible that at the end of the day, the moon moves into Taurus, if you're in the Americas. If you're not in the Americas, the moon is not going to move into Taurus this evening. So, New York time, the moon moves into Taurus at 10:35 p.m. That would be 7:35 p.m. On the West Coast, in California, British Columbia, Oregon. And so if you're an American Virgo, then this evening there might be a change. And I think that you're going to become sort of more positive, more definite, because the moon moving into Taurus, the moon is moving into an earth sign, and you may realize that there is something particular that you want to do, that you want to think about, and you might at the same time find that all of a sudden you become more positive. Things that had been bothering you very recently, suddenly it all disappears, and things just become clearer. And if you're not in the Americas, don't worry. Tomorrow the moon will be moving into Taurus, and that's something I will be talking about in my horoscope for tomorrow, which is a Wednesday. Libra. Moon is still in Aries, and Aries is a sign which is very much connected with relationships in the Libran horoscope. And so like it or not, there may continue to be people that just have to be dealt with. You don't necessarily want to deal with them. You'd perhaps rather ignore them, but they're still there. And it's best to accept the situation and perhaps ask yourself what people have to offer, what they're looking for, what they want. Just because someone wants something doesn't mean you necessarily have to give it to them. But the social dimension, it does have to be considered. And there is a square between the moon and Mercury today. And so you've got, moon in Aries, square Mercury in Cancer. And it just could be, that there are things you would like to do, that you thought you were going to do them. And moon square Mercury can represent just, a bit of a roadblock. Or at least it appears to be a roadblock, just something irritating, is having to make an accommodation of someone else, of someone else's view, and it's actually not something you particularly want to do. Even if you are a Libra, Librans, are looking for balance. They want things to be. They want things to be straightforward. They don't want anything to spoil the balance. And yes, there could be a few things that appear to be spoiling the balance. And you kind of need to take it in your stride. If you are operating in the outside world at any level, it is a social world. And as a Libran, that is something you very much understand. And at least in the first instance, not everyone agrees, and different people have different views. In fact, different people have different truths. There are things they take very seriously that they're not necessarily going to negotiate or compromise. And I think that is something that you need to accept without being overwhelmed by it. I mean, I think that is the important thing. You need to hold firm, for sure, to what you believe in, but you don't want to make a big thing about it. You don't want it to be, a big fuss, and you accept that other people have different approaches, and perhaps today isn't the day for really having a big confrontation about it. Although Libra, deep down, you do know. You are beginning to understand certain things, and certain things about the world, and it may be about yesterday. I mean, yesterday, I think for to many of us, regardless of our sign, things were becoming clearer. Things were coming sort of out into the open, and we understood it, and we understood it in terms of ourselves and our own experiences. And now that we have got it, perhaps it's time to hold firm to what we believe in. So yeah, you can hold firm to what you believe in, but yeah, you don't have to make a big thing about it. It's not about having a big argument. That's not really what today should be about. And with Moon sextile Mercury can be about some initial irritation, but then the Moon does make a sextile to Mars. In fact, Moon sextile Mars is the last major aspect the Moon makes, and with that in a day, and at least before it leaves the sign. And so with Moon sextile Mars, that can be quite constructive, and it's possible that you can sort of smooth things over. So you're aware that there are some disagreements, that there are different views, but Moon sextile Mars means that you can come to an accommodation, at least a short-term accommodation, without really having to give anything away. And so I would have said that that looks pretty good. I mean, it's kind of a short-term solution. I mean, if you're into the tarot cards, I mean, I do the tarot cards sometimes. I'm kind of thinking that it is the card that comes to mind is a Two of Swords. I think it is. And Two of Swords is I think peace, but it's Two of Swords. It sort of suggests, yeah, there is peace, but how long is this peace going to last for? There's still things that need to be resolved, but I don't think, Libra, today is the day for really thrashing things out, for really confronting things, confronting other people. I think you can do that later. For the moment, if you can come to an accommodation, that is definitely good enough. Scorpio, you continue, I think, to have a clear sense of what can be done. I know that things can be quite intense if you're the average Scorpio, but you kind of know that eventually things will work out. Even if short term they appear rather complicated and sort of up in the air and unresolved, it's going to be okay. And you might even be thinking ahead to the fact that Mars, your ruler, is going to change sign soon. It's going to be in Cancer, and I think that on balance, Mars moving into Cancer, it's a change, but I think it's going to be a big plus as far as when Mars does change sign. That I should tell you. Just a note for your diary. It's happening quite quickly. So Mars changes sign on, I think it's the 12th, isn't it? Yeah, the 11th. So yeah, 11th of August. Mars moves into Cancer. Mars moves into a water sign, and I do think that things are going to be easier when Mars changes sign. But for the moment, right now, you're still feeling quite positive. Even if short term, some things just aren't very clear. Some things do seem a bit unresolved. They do seem, rather complicated, but it's okay. And I think that, in fact, Scorpio, you're beginning to really start to understand, what is happening, in quite a profound way. And of course, you probably have a strong sense of, your overall purpose, with the sun in Leo, the sun, powering forward, with the moon in Aries as well. So, moon in Aries and the sun in Leo, both the sun and the moon in fire signs, it does mean that you can really take a successful action. It's not action that is dramatic. You just kind of know what needs to be done. You can almost you can almost think about what needs to be prepared for, because you kind of know what's going to happen next. And so you do something which, in itself might not seem relevant, but what you're doing is you're safeguarding the future, and you're anticipating the next move, someone else's next move, or something happening that no one expects, but you expect it. You for sure you expect it. And so that means that, overall, you can be, very, very well prepared, and you're not going to get too caught up on things which are, irrelevant. Okay, there may be moments in a day where you think that someone is wasting your time, or something is wasting your time. I mean, the moon is making a square to Mercury, and that moon square Mercury can certainly be an irritation, something you have to bother with that you don't really want to bother with. It's just not relevant. Perhaps someone's trying to be clever. They're trying to talk about something which, may be very interesting, but it's just not something you want to bother with. And you might have to bother with it at a later stage, but right now it's not the most important thing on the list. There are things higher up on the list, but the moon, having made a square to Mercury, it moves on and makes a sextile to Mars, and it's possible. In fact, probable, I think, the moon's sextile Mars is, I think, the most important aspect of the day. Certainly for you, Scorpio. I mean, the moon is not doing. Okay, well, the moon is doing stuff. I mean, the moon is square Mercury, the moon is sextile Mars, but other planets, non-lunar aspects, exact non-lunar aspects. Today is non-existent in that sense, and so the moon sextile Mars has that added importance, and this does just give you the ability to act in a very sort of constant and disciplined way, Scorpio. You kind of know what is important, you know what matters, and once you have decided on a particular direction, you can just keep going, and you don't really have to explain yourself. I mean, you might kind of want to explain yourself. Mars is in Gemini, so with Mars, your ruler in Gemini, you're quite capable of talking about why you're doing what you're doing, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe nothing needs to be said, and if you can just keep moving in the same direction, you're going to really make very good progress. And perhaps there's something that had been bothering you for a long time, that had been unresolved, that needed to be finally sorted out, and with moon sextile Mars, that is something you can do, and in the process you can show a certain amount of talent. And the moon, having made that sextile to Mars, it does make a quincunx with Venus. That quincunx to Venus, it's a pretty minor aspect, but it is possible at some stage in the day that your priorities and other people's priorities, do clash. I mean, it may not just be because Moon square Mercury. It may be because Moon quincunx Venus. Remember, Venus is ruler of Taurus. Venus represents the other. It can represent partners. Those really close to you, and it just could feel that what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, doesn't necessarily receive much sympathy. And if you are in that situation, well, possibly you shouldn't really talk about what you're doing. Why discuss something if it's not necessary? And so you have your own ideas about what needs to be organized, and let other people have their ideas. So going back to the theme of this video, defend the truth. What is the truth? And the truth might be quite mundane. The truth might be that there is a particular way of configuring things, and it's right, but not everyone is going to appreciate that. And so given that, maybe you should take the view that it doesn't really need to be discussed. And then if it's not discussed, then it doesn't have to be defended. Now, right at the end of the day, perhaps, if you are in the Americas, the moon does change sign. The moon moves into Taurus. So this sign change takes place, I think if I've got my calculations right, that would be at 10:35 this evening if you're on the East Coast, which would be 7:35 in the evening if you're on the West Coast in California or Oregon or British Columbia, for example. So Moon moving into Taurus, that is an important sign change. And so if you are an American Scorpio, then this evening you might find that certain people do become more important, that your focus does change. It's not just about getting things right, it's about addressing the reality of another person. So if you're in a relationship, or if you live with someone in particular this evening, and you're in the Americas, and as the moon moves into Taurus, taking into account the other person, and Moon moving into Taurus is an earth sign. There is something quite sort of tactile about it, and so it might mean that you and someone else have sort of more contact with each other, and there might be some sort of a bit more sort of emotionality. So that is certainly possible. So there could just be could be a change of gear this evening. If you are in the Americas. Sagittarius, there's still a lot of fire around. I mentioned this yesterday, but the fire just continues. The moon is still in Aries. It's making a conjunction to Saturn. At least the moon was making a conjunction to Saturn, at the beginning of the day. And we've got the Sun and Jupiter in Leo. So Sagittarius, I think that you're still, feeling, I hope, pretty good about yourself, and things are, I think, making sense. When I say making sense, it's not that you have to work out what makes sense. It just it's clear, it's obvious. Yesterday things were obvious, and today things continue to be obvious. And if we're talking about things that are obvious, well, we might be talking about the truth, and defend your truth. What does that mean for you, Sagittarius? The concept of truth is pretty important for the average Sagittarius. Some things are just absolutely self-evident to you, and they may not be self-evident to other people, but it's clear, and I think it's good to have that clarity, provided you recognize that it is your truth. It's not anyone else's truth. It kind of represents your own biases, but not in an emotional way. It's because some things just are obvious, as I've just said, and so we get a continuation of this today. And the moon does make a square to Mercury, and so with the square to Mercury, it could be that there's a little bit of resistance. Maybe not everyone agrees with you. It could be resistance that comes from your own activities. So you think that things are clear, and you come across something that is just annoying. Maybe you come across something, if you're working, it could be something to do with your work. It could be connected with another person, just another person who you don't necessarily agree with. They have a view that you can't entirely accept. And so, you have to accept that different people have different ways of doing things. They have different approaches and different ideologies, different political opinions. And so, sure, you accept that, but at the same time, you defend what is important to you. This is a time, Sagittarius, when you can, really, tune into your fundamental creativity. What is important to you, and it does not have to be justified or explained. Absolutely not. If someone asks you to explain yourself, then that's not something you have to do. Instead, you should be asking, why would someone ask you to explain yourself? Who's insecure? If someone asks you to explain yourself, then in a strange way, they may be revealing their own insecurity. Maybe what you're doing represents a challenge, or it just could be a lack of respect. In most cases, people shouldn't have to, explain themselves. And if you do have to spend ages explaining yourself, well, that's going to annoy you. You don't want to do sort of too much talking. I think that's not really going to be to your liking. Now, the moon in Aries does make a sextile to Mars. In fact, moon sextile Mars, that is the last major aspect that the moon makes before leaving the sign. It does make a quincunx to Venus, but I don't really regard a quincunx as being a major aspect. And so moon sextile Mars can be about other people. It can be about relationships. And it's a very constructive aspect. Now I know that Mars is in Gemini, and Gemini has a sort of reputation for being, quite verbal, but it needn't be about too much talking. It can be just about you and another person, perhaps having something, very constructive to do, and it can be something quite fun. It can be about you and someone else, enjoying each other's company, not trying to force any particular point of view on each other. You're just there, you're with someone, and it's all working fine. So that would be a very constructive way in which moon sextile Mars can work, and also quite a fun way. Now, if something really is important to you, as it might be, then I do think, Sagittarius, that you are absolutely able to defend yourself. You know what matters, and I think that some Sagittarians might want to go further. They might feel that this is a time that when they kind of have to push themselves. So it's not an entirely relaxing day. I think that a little bit of ambition is creeping into proceedings. I mean, in fact, it is quite an ambitious time for you because Jupiter is still opposition Pluto. I mean, I know that we had this Jupiter-Pluto opposition quite a long time ago, but it's still there. It hasn't gone away. Jupiter's at 7-8 degrees Leo, Pluto's at 4 degrees Aquarius. So the two planets are still in opposition. And so you have a strong sense of yourself and what is important, and you may be aware that some kind of transformation might still be required. We talked about transformation with Jupiter opposition Pluto, the feeling you really wanted to do better. Second best was not good enough, and that is starting to manifest now. I think it kind of matters, because if you look at it, I mean, Jupiter is what I just said. Jupiter is 3 or 4 degrees away from Pluto, and the Sun is 4 or 5 degrees past the conjunction with Jupiter. So you could say that the Sun, Jupiter, Pluto, they're still sort of lined up together, and that may say something about your behavior and what you think is important, and there perhaps is just some kind of transformation which hasn't fully been seen through, and you want to make sure that everyone really has understood you, has understood your message. Now, you can still be respectful, but you still have to make sure that you get your way, or at least no one stands in your way, and that might be good enough. You don't need too much outside support right now. Provided you know what you're doing, provided there's no resistance, provided you're respected, Sagittarius, really that's good enough. Capricorn, there is something rather defensive about today. The moon is in Aries. It's at the bottom of your chart. It's in a very protective part of your charts. It represents everything that you are sort of trying to look after, trying to take care of, and it's what you can be defensive about. And the moon is making a conjunction to Saturn. At least at the beginning of the day, the moon was making a conjunction to Saturn. So that means, Capricorn, that you do want to hold firm in terms of what you believe in, what is important to you. And I think that you're not going to want to take too many risks, and you don't really want to sort of mess around and say, no, there is a seriousness here. I mean, that's for sure. And for most of the day, perhaps all of the day, the moon is moving through Aries, and on the way it makes a square to Mercury. It does make a sextile to Mars, and in a way, both those aspects, Moon square Mercury, Moon sextile Mars, are quite defensive. Moon square Mercury can be about how you interact with another person's opinions, having to deal with the other, recognizing that someone else does have opinions, someone else does have something to say. And many Capricorns can just find just too much talking just irritating. People say a lot. They just feel they have to express themselves. They can't help themselves. But what is the point? As a Capricorn, you're interested in things which are more serious than just empty words. And so Moon square Mercury could be an irritating influence, just not finding, you just don't really want to put up with certain people. And what do you do? I think with Moon square Mercury, there are certain people you at the very least have to go through the motions of listening to. It doesn't harm to listen, provided you don't spend too long listening. And then the moon moves on and it makes a sextile to Mars. That moon sextile Mars is the last major aspect the moon makes before leaving the sign, before leaving Aries. And with this aspect, yeah, you certainly know how to defend yourself, moon sextile Mars. And Mars as a planet does have a certain relationship with Capricorn. Don't forget Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So moon sextile Mars does give us this idea of you looking after yourself and of defending what is important to you. But it's a sextile. There are many ways of looking after yourself, defending yourself, and it doesn't have to come to a fight. It doesn't have to come to a big argument. You can just use your abilities and your talents to work your way through. And your willpower right now, Capricorn, is actually very strong. You really can make it clear that some things are important to you. And if you make a decision, then I think that you're really able to see it through. And once you've made this decision, you're going to be a hard person to stop. It doesn't seem obvious, though. I think that from an outside perspective, you're going to seem, relatively retiring. That you're not going to be, in everyone's face. Maybe you can just be ignored. And perhaps that's how you like it. And so you're kind of being ever so slightly deceptive in a good way, because I think that today, you could be actually underestimated. People just underestimate what you can do. And I think they're also underestimating what you're thinking and what you're planning and what you're intending. And if you have one thing that really matters to you, then Capricorn, I'm fairly confident that you'll be, able to see it through. So it's a powerful day, but it doesn't seem like it. It just seems like, a regular Tuesday. But once you've made up your mind about something, really nothing can stop you. And sure, there could be a few disagreements, there could be a few sort of irritations, moon square Mercury, but I think that you can very much handle it. And if push comes to shove, you will come out the winner. I'm pretty confident about that. Now the moon does change sign late in the day if you are in the Americas, and I know that I think approximately half my viewers come from America, have come from the Americas. So it's kind of something I need to mention. So Eastern Standard Time, 10:35 p.m. this evening, the moon moves into Taurus, which would be 7:35 p.m. this evening if you're in California, even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. So moon moving out of Aries into Taurus, that does create a change. And with the sun moving out of Aries, I think you might be slightly less defensive and perhaps slightly less serious. And the reason you might be slightly less defensive is because the moon is moving into an earth sign. And you're an earth sign. It's kind of moving into an element that you're more comfortable with. So, yeah, you don't have to worry so much about things being taken away from you or you being overwhelmed. You just feel better, you feel more constructive, and perhaps it's easier to enjoy yourself. And so I don't know what your plans are this evening. Maybe you've got no plans this evening, but I think if you are an American Taurean, okay, you might just go to bed early and that might be it. But if you are an American Taurean, then this evening there might be a change, and I think it will be a change for the better. Aquarius. You have quite a lot to think about today. I think that Aquarius, your mind is pretty active. Lots of things to pay attention to, lots of different things. And, that's good up to a point. But, what you don't want to happen is for you just to be pulled all over the place. There's this distraction and there is that distraction and something that has to be done and there's something else that has to be done, and you kind of didn't realize that it was all going to build up, and then it suddenly does all build up. And so I think it's going to be quite important, Aquarius, that you look after your time. There are going to be many people who, not many people necessarily, but there are going to be some people who don't fully respect your time, and they'll expect you to respond, and so you have different things to worry about. And it may not just be about other people, it just may be things you notice that you kind of don't want to notice, but once you do notice, well, you have to do something about it. Using a picking weeds analogy, it's like if you've ever picked an invasive species, like Scotch broom. I talk about Scotch broom too much. In the Pacific Northwest, it's a major problem, Scotch broom. And you spend some time picking Scotch broom, and you've done it. You've picked as much Scotch broom as you can, and then you've decided to call it a day. But as Scotch broom is everywhere, you just keep noticing it, and so you never finish what you're doing because you just keep noticing more and more and more, and when you can notice more and more and more, it's just difficult to know when to stop. So you just carry on picking Scotch broom, and so it's likewise here. You notice one thing, you notice something else, and then you notice something else, and it's just little things which in a way are important, but you can't do everything at once. And so it is important to know when to stop, and it's also important to recognize when your time is being wasted, and you've only got so many hours in a day, and it's just possible that there's just so many little things going on that you don't actually achieve what you could achieve. So a bit of self-discipline perhaps is important, and perhaps being able to sort of prioritize, decide what you need to be doing at particular times of the day. And I don't know, you could keep some kind of a diary or a time planner. When the time arrives, you could say you're going to do something until a particular time, and when that time arrives, you switch and just do something else, and don't forget the need to enjoy yourself. To be amused by today. I mean, that's certainly possible. That certainly should happen. The moon is making a sextile to Mars, so this Moon-Mars sextile, I think, can be not just a constructive aspect, but a fun aspect. So there are many things you could do which are not fun, which just seem a chore, and they're not really getting you anywhere. But there are other things, the key things, which you can really do a good job with, and more than that, you can enjoy doing them. And so make sure, whatever you're doing, that you've got time left over to think about yourself and what makes you happy. And you can do it. It's just it really shouldn't be a problem. But so just be aware of all those distractions, and just don't make sure that they don't overwhelm you. And just keep in mind, Aquarius, that there is something driving you today. I mean, there was something driving you yesterday, but I think it's still there. It's pushing you along, and there's just one particular thing that you really do seem to regard as being really very important, and you're not going to let go of it, and you're not going to listen to outside opinion when it comes to this thing. Okay, you don't want to get obsessed, but you do have a lot of power. You have a lot of power to achieve this one goal, and in the process, it might be that you could be slightly destructive. But perhaps you take the view that if something needs to be done, it needs to be done. But you just want to make sure that it doesn't overtake your day. It would be a shame if you just focused your day on just one thing that was, yeah, it might be important, but it might also be exhausting. And so, don't feel that everything has to be achieved today. And yeah, don't be too distracted by things which are essentially trivial. And if you take that approach, then I think it should be a reasonably okay Tuesday. Pisces. Moon is in Aries for most of the day, perhaps all the day if you're not in the Americas. And with the moon in Aries, you do have to think about your priorities. What is important. It could be a time, Pisces, like yesterday, when you have to spend some of the day at least thinking about money. I know money is boring, but there was a conjunction between the moon and Saturn at the beginning of the day. Moon and Saturn is quite a serious aspect, and it requires you to really look at things like money and making sure that it is all in order. And you shouldn't take money for granted. You shouldn't assume that money is going to completely sort itself out all by itself. And it may be with the moon in Aries that you're called on to take some kind of initiative, of a financial nature. And if you are taking such an initiative, it may not be, entirely easy, but, in the end, I think that you are able to see it through. So, the moon in Aries, it does make a square to Mercury. And, moon square Mercury could well be about a disagreement with someone else. You and someone else perhaps have a different view about money, or maybe someone owes you money, or maybe you owe them money, but there's just some possible scope here for a disagreement. But then the moon makes a sextile to Mars, and moon sextile Mars is quite a powerful aspect. At least today it's a powerful aspect. I mean, moon sextile Mars it's not exactly a rare aspect, but there aren't any non-lunar aspects of note today. So perhaps that moon sextile Mars has a sort of an added significance. So, when you decide to really push your point and to make it clear that some things really are important to you, especially if money or possessions are at stake, then I think you know how to do it. You know how to be taken seriously. So if you are talking about money or involved with money, don't do it in a half-hearted way. Think about what you're trying to achieve. Think about your priorities. And if you do that, then I think it very likely that you will get your way. So don't hold back, and do think about what your special interests are of a financial nature. Now, it's possible that the moon changes sign later today. If you're in the Americas, this evening the moon does move into Taurus. It won't move into Taurus if you're in Europe or Asia or Africa or I think it will move into Taurus this evening if you're in Tahiti, but because I think that Tahiti is really moving towards the date line, isn't it? But I don't think you're in Tahiti. But if you are in the Americas, then this evening the moon moves out of Aries and into Taurus. Okay, it might be quite late this evening, not until I think 10:35 this evening if you're on the East Coast, 7:35 if you're on the West Coast. But when the moon moves into Taurus, I think that just things probably become easier. It's because of the sign change. I mean, there are aspects that the moon makes when it does move into Taurus, which I'll be talking about tomorrow. But just the fact that the moon moves into Taurus means that some of the pressure is off. And this evening, if you are in the Americas, there is a possibility of just being more relaxed and feeling that you are in the right place, and that recent worries, particularly of a material nature, are perhaps not as important as you'd imagined, and you can start to think about other things. And yeah, if you're not in the Americas, well, tomorrow, Wednesday, the moon will move into Taurus, and I think that you can experience that change. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 20, which is contemplation. We've had this hexagram quite a lot recently, and contemplation, as the name implies, is not about taking action. And this hexagram just represents a tower. The idea is perhaps that we sit on top of this tower and we just watch. We get an idea about what is going on around us without necessarily responding. So we are, in a sense, gathering information. At a later stage, we might want to do something about this information, but right now, there's no obligation here. But there is a moving line, and we have the fourth line moving, and this fourth line may be about our influence. And but to begin the day, perhaps we feel we don't have an influence, that no one is really listening to us. But it's it's starting to occur to us that people are listening to us, and that people do have an opinion or an approach that is certainly worth listening to. And maybe we are one of those people. We are, perhaps because we're able to step outside and look at things from a distance, we have a certain objectivity, and we can express an opinion about something that we're not emotionally involved with, and that opinion might be appreciated. So that is certainly a way in which this hexagram could work, and it could work the other way. We have to be respectful of what other people have to say. Other people are able to perhaps look at our own lives in a way that is objective. It doesn't really matter to them what we do with our lives, but they have a view, and if they have a view, then that view should be taken into account. So it doesn't have to be entirely passive, this hexagram contemplation, because with contemplation comes some thinking, comes some ideas, and perhaps some of those ideas need to be expressed. But the question is, what happens then? So this fourth line moves, and because of the fourth line moving, we get to a second hexagram, and that hexagram is hexagram number 12, which is standstill. So it might be a case of we watch things, we observe, we notice things. What we notice could, in theory, be useful, and it might be useful up to a point, but at a certain stage we recognize that in the end it didn't make any difference. Things don't move, and perhaps we should accept that. It is a day of contemplation, because if we were to take action, in the end, with standstill, nothing would happen. And so it is best perhaps to stay in that sort of contemplative state. If we try to interact with the world, we try to, to make things happen, I think that we could be ignored, and we might find that people are at odds with one another. And if people are at odds with one another, well, short term, I think it's just best to accept the situation And that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.